This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. This is the Lansing Online News Radio Show, and I'm about to be joined by my co-host, Bill Castanier. We are being very transparent tonight. Do you think that the federal government is considering all this data worth scraping, Bill?
Yeah, I'm sure we're on a list.
We've been trying really hard to get on that list, you notice?
I've been on a few lists in my life. Some of them weren't so much fun.
Now, did you ever make it to being on the enemies list in the old days?
I was on a red file, yep.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
But it appeared anyone that went near a demonstration was.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, my mother was actually back on one from the 1940s.
Those are the ones that really mattered.
She was a marcher in the 30s and 40s, so she was doing civil rights work, that kind of thing, or at least showing up at the marches.
But once they discovered they existed, and then once they revealed, you could go check and see if your name was on it. I got my file. It was pretty nonplussed, but I remember learning about it. I was in a class at MSU.
Yeah.
And this like ex-ROTC, this guy actually, he was from the military service working at MSU, and he said, "Who are you? What do you do?" He'd ask me lots of questions. Next day he came back and told me.
Oh, that he was there sussing you out?
No, he knew. Well, I mean, no. Next day he came back with all the information.
Oh, he already knew.
Yeah, it was in the red file.
Ah.
But it was junk.
Oh, yeah.
It really was junk. There wasn't anything.
But that's a badge of honor.
Yeah, I suppose. I could do without being on anybody's list.
Well, what's so interesting now with this Edward Snowden case is that I see so many people for whom it was always very easy to claim Daniel Ellsberg as a hero. Everybody wanted to. All the reporters said Daniel Ellsberg, big hero of journalism. All of a sudden they have a new Ellsberg, and I noticed they're a lot more squeamish than they used to be. In fact, I was amused. The parallels are quite similar. We're in a time of war, just as we were in Vietnam. We have somebody who has access to classified documents. They choose to leak them because they feel that the government is doing and saying things that are different than what they're actually doing and saying, and that the American public has a right to know. In fact, Daniel Ellsberg says that this leak is far more important than what he leaked back in the Vietnam days. So the parallels are very strong, but it's amusing because the press is, all of a sudden, you can write the headline itself, can't you? It's, is he a hero whistleblower or is he a dirty scumbag criminal? And they're not so quick to call him a hero. On CNN on Sunday, one of the female reporters said, well, but there's a big difference between Daniel Ellsberg and this Edward Snowden guy. He's younger. Yeah, and he wears glasses too.
It was pretty.
Yeah, and his hair's a different color.
Yeah, his name's different.
I noticed that on the NBC website this morning, what were the first 3 words used to describe Mr. Snowden? High school dropout.
Yeah.
Yes, they thought those were the single most important things that you needed to know about this whole case, was that 29-year-old Mr. Snowden was a high school dropout. He, of course, does well enough as an IT person under contract, both for the CIA and separately. He's making $200,000 a year and living in Hawaii, so he didn't even have to show up at the office. But, I mean, somehow high school dropout was what we really ought to know about this young man.
Well, that was part of probably disinformation that was being spread around.
Oh, which was? Well, it's not disinformation.
I mean by the federal government.
Oh, one of the points he made was exactly that. He said one of the things that worried him was, with all the data that they're collecting on you and me, if we ever do anything where we become too outspoken a critic, they can write a bio of you and hang you with their own words. They'll pull a little snippet from that, email that you wrote 10 years ago to a friend that it was a joke, but it makes you sound like you're threatening somebody. He said it's so easy to go back and redo somebody's history.
Yeah, high school dropout watches porno.
Yes.
There's no privacy.
Yeah. Well, what's funny, though, is if the government is collecting all of this, should I give up my subscription to Carbonite?
Yeah.
I mean, if I lose my hard drive, can I just call the feds and say, hey, by the way, would you mind restoring that for me? I know you've got it out there in that new facility.
I think I've told you the story of Bill Ayers, who was Obama's pal and the founder of the Weatherman. When he wrote his first book, I asked him in an interview how he could be so detailed where he was on specific days and what he did. Guess how?
He just got his file.
He got his file. They watched him that carefully up until the time when they actually wanted to catch him, put him in jail. He disappeared.
Then they couldn't find him.
Then they couldn't find him.
That's funny. When they actually needed to.
Yeah, and he was in East Lansing.
Oh, well, really? How much of the time was he here?
He was there quite a bit.
Do we know with whom, or shall we not say?
He was with Bernadine Doran.
Yeah, she was on the lam as
She
well.
was 2 blocks from the East Lansing police station
Wow.
for months,
Walking around East Lansing,
and
yeah.
no one. I mean, she was pretty easy to recognize.
That's, you know, I'm torn with this story because on the one hand, it certainly makes the federal government look like this huge, sophisticated monolith that's able to track you at a moment's notice in real time, for example. And on the other hand, I know what bunglers many of those people are. So I mean, I think the bigger danger in some ways are the mistakes they could make about you.
Oh, absolutely. It's somebody entering it into a book, and they make errors. Yeah. I mean, Michigan's history as a state of doing, checking up on its residents goes back to the teens of the last century.
Oh, really? They've had a
In Detroit,
monitoring.
yep.
Yeah,
So it goes back a long way.
yeah. Government always wants
Detroit
to do
had some
that.
pretty amazing records, and I don't know what and if they are available even.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens now. First of all, I think we're going to see a lot more traffic using DuckDuckGo instead of Google,
Mm.
because DuckDuckGo doesn't keep any search history on you and they don't collect any data on you. Google, of course, wants to know everything about you. The difference is, though, that Google can't quite put you in jail. I think they could try, I don't know, but you know, the government databases are a lot more dangerous. I was amused to see, though, that when Mr. Snowden first approached Glenn Greenwald, the reporter for the Guardian newspaper out of England, about giving him some information, he said, well, you know, we want to use PGP, pretty good privacy, you know, that nice free program that you can use to encrypt. And of course, Greenwald had no clue. He had to make the guy a YouTube video. Show him how to install it. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking up Mr. Snowden's video and figure out how to do that
It'd
on
be
their own
interesting to see how
computers.
many hits he has now.
I know. I
Yeah,
don't know if that video is public or
they
private.
probably took it down.
I would assume the government may have a role in that. But you know, there has been interest in building what is called the dark web or the hidden web. And it would be an encrypted web that is a companion to the superficial public web that is less commercial, originally suggested as a sort of academic web. But there are plenty of people involved in that movement who think that we need to have a separate internet so that the government doesn't have a backdoor and so that they don't have a kill switch.
Were you surprised when you learned of this?
Was I surprised at the scope?
Mm-hmm.
No, because quite honestly, I was around doing consulting in Washington with police at the time that 911 happened. And what I saw was this enormous gravy train pull up to the back of the Capitol, where all of the Beltway bandits who had previously had to chip off little pieces for training police and doing these kinds of things, once the budget started to flow to Homeland Security, boy, you could get a fortune for doing something like getting hazmat suits in the middle of Kansas, you know?
Yeah.
And it didn't take long for somebody to approach the feds and say, look what we could do with all these new digital mining tools. And that's very dangerous because these are both private contractors and private companies collaborating with the government. The control over the employees, as you see in this case, is minimal. They're contract employees. He wasn't even, you know, a direct employee of the CIA or the NSA. This is a really whole new frightening world where we see this collapse of corporate power and corporate greed in bed with the government's desire to want to know everything about us. And I think it's profoundly dangerous.
Do you think he'll be extradited?
I think the search is on. And I'm assuming that they, you know, they were, by the way, the interesting thing, they were already hunting for him. He had left 3 weeks ago. He had left Hawaii and was headed, you know, he told his girlfriend that he was going away for a while, which he often did because he was doing covert work, so it wasn't that much of a surprise to her. But when his bosses apparently found out that his supposed medical work that he was having done wasn't maybe really happening, they started to look for him.
Database search.
Yeah, but I mean, I think he is definitely a hunted man. I found it sort of offensive today, though, that the mainstream media was very quick to say, gee, he's so paranoid, thinking that they'd come and rub him out. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, what part of Abdul Rahman al-Waki don't you remember? You know, he's a 16-year-old American citizen living in Yemen. His dad went from being somebody that the government used to use for workshops to try to help our authorities understand Muslims, and instead he became so radicalized after both of our wars that he became very much a jihadist. And he was killed by, dad was killed by a drone, and then they killed the 16-year-old son who in Yemen, who is an American citizen. He's never had any involvement with terrorism, but this is the kind of stuff they were keeping secret. I mean, this guy knows where some of those bodies are buried, literally, and I think he probably had every reason to be a bit paranoid.
I'd be scared at a minimum.
Oh my goodness. I think that anybody who's ever known him is probably busy trying to figure out how to clean out their Gmail inbox even as we speak.
It's too late.
Ah.
Yeah, you think of everything you put in email or do online. It's, oh my gosh.
Oh, I mean, the jokes that I've told, the things, oh, it chills my blood.
The kittens, the dogs.
All those, yes, all those.
Subversive animals.
All those videos that I have. You do know that's where I spend most of my time online, is watching animals
Our
licking
medical
their own
marijuana
nether
interviews.
Our medical marijuana. See, we could be in trouble.
I'm in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, we found out that the big IRS scandal was simply some lowly Republican bureaucrat who said, I want to cut down on my workload. I bet if I use the search term Tea Party, I could cut down on the time I have to spend going through all these applications to find ones that might be political. You know, I mean, that's really all it was about. I mean, the web has changed our lives in amazing ways, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure. Well, I've got this book that I found. I'm just looking in my library today for something I find, The Guide to Subversive Organizations and Publications. This is from the 1950s. It's an entire book that the
It's
U.S.
very
government
thin.
published. Yeah, and I'm sure this is online now, I'm sure. Not this book, but there's something just like it that they're using to look at people.
What kind of things did they list?
Oh, odd things. The Westchester Rosenberg Committee, the South Slav Committee for Protection of Foreign Born, Sons and Daughters of the Foreign Born.
Would you mind looking up the organization my grandmothers belonged to?
What is it then?
It was the LDS in Cleveland.
Okay, what did the L stand for?
Boy, it was probably something in Lithuanian I can't pronounce.
It's the National Free Broder Congress. I mean, this.
My dad was really nervous in World War II. He was a supervisor at a forge plant in Cleveland. They were making bomb parts. And both of my grandmothers were card-carrying commies, so he was
How
a little
about the Lithuanian American Committee for Protection of Foreign Born?
Aha.
That's you.
Yeah, that's us. Yeah, that was Granny. Yeah.
Yeah, they were all over the country.
Yeah. See?
Whoa.
Nowadays, it would all be in a database someplace out in Utah.
You know what it was? It was probably, you said LCD?
LDS.
Okay, this is the Leonard Costa Defense Committee.
No.
I would be willing to bet, though, you were the Lithuanians they were looking for.
That's something,
The
yes.
Latvians?
We think of the big three as Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Some might differ in that, but those were always the big three in our family. Yeah.
I mean, we can laugh at this now, but people that belong to these groups were just terrorized.
Well, and I think what we have to worry about now is that once you're on some of these lists, I think as many people have discovered, you stay on those lists forever. People who've been stopped by the police and find out how hard it is, or they're on a no-fly list and it's not them. Once you get into those databases, it's very hard to get out. The irony in our case, though, is that we are paying for all of this, both in terms of, we're paying for all of our online services to the corporations. At the same time, we're paying tax dollars to do this. We have to chip away at Social Security so we can build this new facility in Utah. The only thing that makes me feel somewhat intrigued is Twitter is never mentioned as one of the big companies. You notice it's Facebook and Google. Twitter apparently refused to participate. And so I guess I'm going to be moving to Twitter. I'm kind of, I want to learn a little more about that. I mean, these companies are forced to lie about their participation. They're not allowed to reveal
Look
it.
at Verizon.
Yeah.
You think if they participated, they could give you a bill you could understand.
Well, that might be nice
that would
too.
help. I mean,
or a discount.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a story we're going to have to stay on, especially because I think it's only the beginning. Glenn Greenwald has announced that he's going to be rolling out a lot more stories in the future, so we'll be talking about this quite a while.
And where are they being written?
Well, not by American media.
Right.
But, that's because this young man decided to go to Greenwald.
Yeah.
Greenwald is also being marginalized. They're calling him a blogger, and he's a bit more than a blogger these days. He was an attorney who was a specialist in this area, and he began blogging. And then Salon magazine hired him, and he ran a very popular column there for years. And The Guardian picked him up. The Guardian's been, I think, doing a great job of picking up great commentators and doing a lot of groundbreaking work. So Laurie Poitras, the filmmaker who did the interview with him, is from the Washington Post. There are a lot of good people involved in this story.
It's not going to go away. It's going to be front page news for a long time.
I think so. Well, we should switch gears now because it's nice and bright and sunny and summer almost, right? The sun came out later on in the day.
And we had plenty of rain today.
So that means that it is time for food. And we are joined by Valerie Marvin from the Greater Lansing Historical Association or Society.
Historical Society of Greater Lansing.
I never do get it. I keep promising myself I'm going to get it tattooed on my forehead or something. Just write it on my hand. Because you're doing a show about Lansing Eats, and
Yes.
we're also joined by Joan Nelson, who many of you know. She's in the process of building a major food hub here in Lansing. So we're going to start first by talking a little bit about this exhibit. Every Sunday now through...
It's the first Sunday of the month.
First Sunday of the month.
So our next opening will be July 7th. And the exhibit is called Lansing Eats. It's all about a look at food culture in Lansing over the last 120, 150 years or so.
They didn't eat before that?
Well, there wasn't much Lansing back
there was lots of food, but no Lansing.
Yeah, pretty much. The exhibit looks at how food has been produced in the area and distributed. We have a whole area that's all about Lansing dairies over the years. We have some great advertisements that are over 100 years old. We look at companies that are still in business, like High Class Bottling, which produced a lot of beverage sodas and so on over the years. They were associated with Canada Dry.
That was a High Class beverage, Canada Dry?
Yeah.
And it's gone now, right?
It was bottled by them, yes.
Okay.
No, High Class is still in business.
Oh, High Class is still in business? Things like Delaware Punch, I remember from... See, she's going to give me that blank look. I remember all these obscure... The Delaware Punch was in Jackson, Michigan. I don't know if it made it as far north as to Lansing.
Okay.
But what other kinds of sodas did they have?
They had all sorts of things over the years. What's really neat is there are a lot of bottles you can find. They bottled Kool-Aid at one point in time.
What?
And so, we have a glass Kool-Aid bottle that says bottled by High Class on
Really?
it. All sorts of different liquids were flowing through Lansing over the years.
Including illicit ones in certain areas.
Yes, well, that's a different story because Lansing was dry for a long time.
It was, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even when I moved here, it was still dry in East Lansing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting local politics there.
Yeah.
We also talk about restaurant culture in Lansing. We have some great items from different drive-ins. We have these masks that are so much fun. They're kids' menus from the 1950s. And they're actually masks that you can punch out the eyes and the ears and tie around your head, and you have, instant clown or instant Indian or something like that. We also have materials from Lansing restaurants that have existed for close to 100 years. I mean, Emil's downtown, we have things from there, menus, plateware that they've had over the years. And, you want to talk about juicy stories. The local rumor is always that Al Capone would eat at Emil's when he was
Is that right?
and have ice cream sundaes there.
I never heard that.
While we're talking about sweets, Fabiano's also is another place that we include in the exhibit, and all of their chocolate. It's a very traditional immigrant story, Italian family who comes actually to the west side of Michigan first, kind of in the Holland area, and then they end up at Lansing in a few years. And like a lot of Italian immigrants, they started off with a fruit stand and selling ice cream, and then this morphed into candy. And today, Fabiano's is a part of Lansing. It's that landmark on Michigan Avenue. Yeah. We have items from Jim's Tiffany and the different predecessors of that owned by the Vilhakis family. In fact, we just confirmed today that Angie Vilhakis is actually going to do a Q&A with us that we're going to open up to the public for people to come down. That'll be on July 6th, actually.
Did you find the first Coney Island in town?
Yeah.
Whose was it?
What is it? What's the Coney Island we have?
First Coney Island.
We have a sign for one of the first.
One of the first.
Pretty hard to narrow it down.
I know, there's a big fight on that always.
The sign that we have up with the Coney Islands is actually Dimitri's.
Oh, okay.
Which, of course, was downtown for years.
God, I forgot about Dimitri's.
Now they're on the west side.
Right. And see, the interesting thing is there's some restaurants that have only been gone a few years that we've already forgotten about.
Well, that's what's funny.
They pass into history like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you existed before the internet, it's hard for you to resurface too. So this is a really great exhibit to remind us of some of those places.
One of my favorites is the menus we have from Kewpies.
That's what I was thinking of, the Kewpies.
A hamburger for 40 cents.
Oh,
Just look at it and think, oh my word. On the other end, we do have some things from the Pear and Partridge, which existed out by the airport in the 1960s. That was the opposite end of the spectrum. Kewpies was what you had in college, the olive burger you gobbled down at 2 a.m. in the morning when you were studying. And the Pear and Partridge was where you went for the graduation dinner with mom and dad when they were paying. It was a high-end French restaurant, but even there, you look at the menu and there's a steak for $3 on it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
The
just
prices are still.
crazy.
Yeah.
My favorite is a menu from the Purple Cow, which is around 1913.
Purple
Oh,
steer.
Steer. Cow, steer. I get them confused.
Thank goodness the cows don't.
Yeah, but there's a menu item on it of fried snapping turtle.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I had turtle
Probably-
soup at Topinka's many years ago, back when I was still a meat eater.
Well, the other fun
Is
thing,
turtle meat? I thought it was an amphibian.
I think
the
that still
Catholic
counts
Church
as.
considers beaver actually a fish because they swim. So you
I
can
am
eat
not
those
going to
during
go there,
Lent.
Valerie.
Or muskrat.
I am restraining myself.
I know.
This is
The-
LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, so I don't get in trouble with the feds one way or the other. We're talking with Valerie Marvin about food in Lansing from the past and what different kinds of dishes and foods there were. It was much more of a Mediterranean culture back then,
Oh, it
wasn't it? I
was.
mean,
It
you didn't
was.
see vegetarian selections very often.
Part of the exhibit that we have is a whole collection of locally produced cookbooks, and those are so much fun to look through because every organization that would fundraise over the year with a cookbook, you always put your best recipe in those, and it's crazy to look at the things people are eating. Our oldest cookbook that we have on display is 1901, and the recipes are written in paragraph format, so it's it's not something you can glance at that a current cook would even know how to read instantly. And when you read some of these recipes, it's like, make a yellow cake and then do this, this, and this, because you just know how to make a yellow cake,
Right.
apparently.
Google yellow cake.
Yeah, you know, I didn't get to Google that one.
And the things they're eating, though, I mean, squirrel, any sort of wild game. There's turtle soup. There's mock turtle soup in case your turtle stock is
One
going
of my
low.
grandmother's favorite was duck blood soup. Oh,
Yes.
joy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I always like a soup that clots. You know?
That's one thing.
That's how you tell it's done, I guess.
That's one thing I couldn't. I've eaten it and I ate it because I had to.
Yes,
Hard to
right.
explain,
Yeah, they
but-
held a gun to your head.
Oh, it was awful.
That and turnips. You told me years ago
I
you
ate both of
can't
them.
eat turnips.
I can't eat turnips.
Yeah. There was kishka, which was a blood sausage. It was black. Ugh. Yeah, I don't think. Sometimes looking backward on food is not a good thing.
It's interesting, though.
It is
And it's
interesting.
interesting all of the ways that we celebrate with food, all of the rites of passage that are associated with it. People, their wedding receptions in a certain restaurant downtown, or we have a table set up with all sorts of china from different local organizations, and a lot of them are connected to local fraternities. Like we have plateware from the Masonic Temple that was used for years.
You know what's funny
And-
though, Valerie? What's changed in the culture is that back when I went to high school in the early '60s, girls were constantly building their hope chest with their china and their silver patterns. It was such a big deal. I never hear of any young women nowadays that are worried about any of that.
Well, I have a silver pattern, but I'm not saying that I'm wrong.
Or maybe Pinterest will keep that alive because I think everybody's sharing their patterns there, that kind of thing.
It's interesting though. We have a piece on loan from a local collector that's from the Ari Olds Clubhouse. It's actually custom china that they had made for that, and there's a little glass with it. And you first look at the glass and you think, oh, this is for some sort of alcoholic drink or something. But then when you learn about Ari Olds and Meta Olds, they were prohibitionists. They were some of the leaders in the effort to keep Lansing dry, actually. And so the thought that they would have ever served alcohol in their clubhouse they would be spinning in their grave.
Couldn't it be just a little orange juice, maybe? Or?
That's what it was.
That's what it is.
Oh.
Just a
Yeah,
little
more
juice.
likely
Just a
orange
little
juice.
orange
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of that medicinal orange juice too, maybe.
And we're also looking at ways that we've tried to supplement food in tough times. For example, the city market actually loaned us their big giant scale that they have. And the city market was created in the 30s as a way of bringing fresh produce in because people, of course, were having a hard time getting food. Everyone was on very tight budgets still in the Depression. And it's fun. There was literally an entire family weighing themselves on this scale the other day when they came into the exhibit because it holds up to like 500 or 600 pounds.
Wow.
And we also have some things from the Greater Lansing Food Bank that talks about the establishment of that. And also looking back to Victory Gardens and the gardening movement that existed during the World War II era, which in many ways you can draw parallels with the local foods movement of today.
Oh, absolutely.
Where people are saying we want to be self-sufficient. We want to know where our food is coming from and know that it's always going to be there.
40% of the food consumed in that era was from home gardens.
Right.
Yeah, that's an amazing statistic, and I'm not sure that's replicatable today. It's a much smaller percentage, unfortunately. We don't have quite as much space in the land, I think, for people to do those things. But it's interesting looking back, when you were talking about how people supplemented in hard times. One of the things that I think is kind of sad to have seen is that we used to have the little corner grocery store,
Yes.
where someone could run up a tab when they had somebody in the family who was laid off. Most of these stores issued their own kinds of credit, and some families went a year or two without being able to pay on the tab, but they could still feed their families. It's kind of, we've kind of changed the culture in terms of the corporate supermarket, but I'm not so sure in some ways we haven't lost a little something along the
There's
way.
in the exhibit there are 2 receipt books where
Oh,
people
really?
are running tabs.
Oh,
So you
interesting.
can see what they bought. One's at the turn of the century, and I think one's the 30s, maybe 20s, 30s.
Huh.
So you can actually see what people bought each week.
Do you have old food stamps?
We have ration booklets.
Ration booklets. Interesting.
We don't.
So
have
you could
old
get sugar.
Yes.
They were
sugar,
specific to different kinds of things.
I didn't know that
kinds.
until I saw them.
Different kinds of soap, actually.
Huh?
My grandfather was a butcher who ran a grocery store in the 1930s into World War II era. And this was in Owasso, but he always told the story about a woman who had come up with all of these coupons, whether or not she was supposed to have them or how she got them, we weren't sure, but came in on the day they had a delivery of laundry soap come in. And she wanted to buy every single laundry soap in the store and had the tickets to do it. And he had to say, look, I can't do that.
Yeah.
We have to have it here for different people coming in. But, you don't think of laundry soap necessarily being something that would be considered.
Oh,
But it ended up on the
product,
black
but-
market.
Oh, it did.
And there's a big
Sure.
original poster about not selling on the black market during World War II in the exhibit.
Mhm.
Hoarding was a real problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very difficult. Oh, yeah. That's a fascinating look back. Bill and I got interested in this whole kind of thing because we ran across that Nelson Algren book from the America Eats project back in the 1930s when the federal government, in an effort to keep artists and writers and photographers alive, were issuing these kinds of contracts, and they gave some noted authors the opportunity to write about what people in groups were eating.
Mhm.
And it used to be that we divided out so often by ethnic group. There was the Polish foods over here, and we don't see very many English restaurants, even yet today. They weren't very
Just because the
popular.
food wasn't any good.
Pretty good.
That's what a restaurateur told me. The owner of Coral
Haggis
Gables.
to go, yeah.
Yeah, they said, I asked him that dumb question. It was like a setup for a line. He said, when have you ever seen anything healthy coming out of the English? That's why the
Look at
Greeks
their-
and the Lebanese and
The
the
old
Italians.
jokes about just look at their teeth and you get
I just-
scurvy, I think. Yeah, not enough of fruits and veggies in that diet. What kinds of things were surprising to you? What kind of surprises did you run into?
I was surprised at the number of cookbooks that came in actually, and how many of these cookbooks survived. Some of them come in and they're just covered with stains. And you can literally open them up, and okay, that was their favorite recipe.
Yeah, the flour is still in there.
Mhm,
Yeah.
Exactly. Some of the pages are stuck together, and you can't pry them apart.
Yeah.
But I was really intrigued to see that people had kept these for so long. And, a lot of the things that are in the exhibit are on loan because we don't have a large collection ourselves. And a lot of people, when they would loan their cookbooks, you can keep this one and you can keep that one, but I must have this one back. Even when I'm done with it, my daughter wants it someday. And these are like sacred family heirlooms.
They are. Yeah. I remember going through the community. There's a special collection of quite a bit of this material at MSU, and as you rightly note, also at U of M. But I had a chance to go through some of those community cookbooks, and I was going to try to make it my goal to go down every few weeks and just grab some more. One was like tomato juice cake. I mean, things that you just wouldn't think of. I mean, there's some really odd things and I don't know if it was ever popular or it just made it into one community cookbook.
I've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
But some of the recipes you see in there, I mean, once you hit the 1950s, everything is Jell-O.
Oh God,
Jell-O
yes.
this, Jell-O that. Carrots, meat. There's like Jell-O meatloaves, pretty much you can make.
My mother had a cookbook that was all of things that you could make with all these popular modern products, like Jell-O. Jell-O was modern, and Betty Crocker cake mix was modern. So you didn't want to use any natural foods at all, nothing known to nature. Just go to the shelves and get all the little what to do with Ginty Moore's stew.
And Lansing was home to a very famous cook, the Martha Dixon Show.
Yes.
That was on WJM for years and years and years, and we're actually showing some of her footage. It was part of the exhibit,
Wow.
and it amazes me how many people will just stand there and watch that because they remember it. I mean, she was a pioneer. She was a woman doing this back in the 1950s originally, and there weren't too many of them who were really stepping out that way.
She's fascinating too.
She was
really
good.
Mhm.
I didn't remember kind of watch that. I mean, I knew who Martha Dixon was.
Oh,
I knew
yes,
her.
you did. We know you ran home every day.
Every day, right? Yeah. But I was surprised at how good she is. She could do TV better than most people are doing today.
I think so too. I mean, she was kind of this area's Oprah, you know. She was really very good at that. I grew up in Cleveland where we had Dorothy full-time, and she used to interview people. She didn't do cooking, but any celebrity that came through town. I remember sitting down one night and she had done Frank Lausche, you know, the state senator, and then she did Irma the Body, who was coming through for a burlesque show. I mean, she'd interview anybody, but she was sort of fascinating because she named her daughter Dorothy Full-Time Jr. I've never. I think she was a little ahead of her time. But Martha was ahead of her time. She really was. She was a real fixture around. How many years was she on the air? Did you figure out?
28.
Yikes.
28 years.
28. Nobody gets 28 years on
You don't
TV.
get 2 years.
No, even
Cooking
Oprah.
show.
Wow. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ, here in Lansing, Michigan, where our tenure will be much shorter than 28 years, I'm sure. But, you know, that kind of fits with this whole food thing. Joan, you're from the Allen Street Market. People are more interested in food nowadays, aren't they? I mean,
Oh,
isn't
they
there
absolutely
food
are.
culture here in town?
Yes, they are. And it's food is exploding all over Lansing. We have, as you know, we have lots going on the east side. We have the Allen Street Farmers Market, which is sliding into its 10th year.
10 years
Amazing,
already.
10 years, yeah. And
I still think of it as that new market.
that brand new market.
Yeah.
You know, amazingly, when we launched the market back in 2004, we were one of 3 farmers markets in the region. There was the Downtown City Market, there was the Meridian Market, and then there was the Allen Street
Wow.
Farmers Market. Today, there are over 20 in
Yeah.
Michigan. I mean, it's
Yeah.
grown hugely. It's quite amazing.
And to be honest about it, I mean, the city market is a city market and not a farmer's market.
That's true.
And there is a
That's true.
distinction. And one of the things I think listeners ought to know about, because I don't know that everybody's really aware of that, is that a farmer's market does have from local producers, whereas a city market can have, you know, it can come in wholesale off a truck.
Right.
So it can be different. Some people
It's
are.
somewhat different. Right?
It is a different.
Although there are lots of local farmers at our city market.
Are we reaching capacity in the sense that?
I think we are, and you know, I didn't think that a year ago.
Oh, okay.
But I'm beginning to think that we're pretty saturated with farmers markets. I I've been told that small to medium-sized farmers were disappearing at a fairly rapid rate about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and it was projected that about 80% of them would be gone by 2020, and it appears that that has totally stopped, at least in part.
Yes.
That disappearance has stopped because of the presence of all of these farmers markets. But so today, a farmer in mid-Michigan can be at a market 6 days a week, but when would they farm, right? When would
That's
they
part
grow
of the
food?
challenge, isn't it? I mean, a lot of farmers say that some of the rules require that they have to be there
Exactly.
or a member of their family in order
Exactly.
to handle
Although,
it.
you know, and I think that will change as well. I think
It
the
has to,
markets,
doesn't it?
the markets will want to accommodate farmers and make it as easy as possible for them to vend at their respective markets. You know, so I think we are approaching saturation. I mean, it was the case that new markets would open up sometime in the last 10 years, and immediately the immediate community, surrounding community, would have its own walkable market.
Yeah.
But at this point, you know, over 20 is I think that's about it. You know, it's that's one of the reasons why our new Allen Marketplace, this 5,000 square foot warehouse that we've been working on for the last year and a half, will host, among other food initiatives, something called the Exchange. And what the Exchange will do is link growers in mid-Michigan with institutional and commercial buyers, with restaurateurs, with caterers, with food service managers in hospitals and nursing homes and group homes and whatnot, in order to enable them to buy local.
Wow.
So in this way, you know, farmers, rather than spending 6 hours at a farmer's market, can come in once a week for a couple of hours and deliver the goods, essentially, to these local larger buyers. And we think that that's going to be really, really pretty successful.
That's building an important piece of that local food infrastructure that
It
many
really
communities
is. It
don't
really
have.
is. You know, we've had conversations over the years with food service managers in schools and hospitals, and what they'll say to us, what they have said to us, is, you know, I can't come to a farmer's market and shop.
Right.
I can't run through the yellow pages and find, you know, 2 or 3 different farmers and call them up and find out what they sell. And so as much as they have wanted to buy mid-Michigan grown produce, it's just not been feasible. So our exchange will essentially be the middleman.
And what they
It's
would
a,
do is exactly what you were talking about. If they came in, they would wipe out. They, they might buy the entire supply that a vendor
yes,
might have. The
yes,
other difference, of course, also is that when you're vending at a market, you're vending at retail. And when you're
yes,
selling to a hospital or to a school, you're selling at wholesale. So
that's
it's very
right.
different for the farmer, too.
It is different. Uh, the way, I don't know if people are interested in how this exchange will work, but I find it fascinating in that this is all web-based.
Ah,
And farmers will be enrolled in the exchange. And once enrolled in the exchange, we're going to be doing a lot of marketing for the farmers. They'll be featured on our website. We're developing these wonderful handouts that they can distribute at farmers markets because farmers often have a hard time marketing what they do. So
it's not the same set of skills.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
farmers will log on to our new website, www.allenmarketplace.org. They will list all that they have available for sale, say by Sunday night at 5 o'clock. By Monday at 5 o'clock, all of the procurers who are enrolled in the exchange will log on and commit to purchase. Farmers then have Tuesdays to package up the product, and then everybody comes together on Wednesdays from noon until 2.
Wow.
And it's a really wonderful system. We've watched pretty closely a similar organization in Grand Rapids called FarmLink. And this all happens on Wednesdays, in downtown Grand Rapids. And this being Grand Rapids, their FarmLink couple of hours also features a whole table of microbrews. And so the growers sit and talk with the chefs and the
Wow.
food. You'd love it. You would love it.
This is amazing.
So
That's
it's
great.
quite amazing. So it'll be very interesting. We have our first 5 growers enrolled in the exchange and the first 4 procurers, and so we'll go live with this in the next couple of weeks and really launch. But we anticipate that that farmers will be really very interested in this. We're already getting lots of inquiries. The Allen Marketplace, this 5,000 square foot charming, colorful place, will also house our farmers market between November and mid-May. So for the first time this year, we'll become a year-round market. We'll be able to hopefully seamlessly slide everything indoors.
So
come
what days of the
November.
week will that be during?
Same.
Okay.
Wednesdays from 2:30 until 7.
Oh, wow.
And it won't be our great sprawling, 25
Uh-huh.
booth market that you see from May through October. It'll be a scaled down version, probably 12 farmers, but at least half will be produce farmers, given this hoop house revolution that's happened across Michigan in the last several years.
Yeah.
Many growers actually grow all year round, or
Yeah.
10 or 11 months of the year in any case. So we'll have this scaled down farmers market with probably about 12 vendors, if they like one another, if you can fit that many in. And we think that, we're delighted. What this means is that a lot of people on the east side who've come to depend on our seasonal farmers market as a weekly walkable grocery store that's gone away every
Right. What do you do?
November
Yeah.
is going to be around
Yeah.
all year round. And then
Well, one of the things that you found out too, and you started construction or deconstruction, that this was an original
yes.
grocery store, wasn't it?
Oh, it's so
Oh,
exciting.
that's
We got in. This warehouse behind the neighborhood center had been empty for years and years, and we started to do the deconstruction. We took down 2 layers of really hideous ceiling tile, and revealed was this beautiful metal dome ceiling.
Oh,
It was
really?
absolutely gorgeous. And then we found that some of the block work was pretty pale. It's in this kind of strange pattern. We began to remove some of the blocks and uncovered 5 original windows, huge windows.
Wow.
It's quite beautiful. It's really pretty amazing. And what we discovered is that this huge space was the original Kircher grocery store. And Fred Kircher was the longest serving city council member in Lansing, in Lansing's history.
Now, that's not a
And
name I've ever heard.
Fred Kircher, you've heard of
but,
Kircher Park down by
right, but I mean
by Red Cedar?
the grocery store. Did those
It was
go
the
out?
Kircher. It was the Kircher grocery store, and early on, and then he just kept, doing additions, onto the grocery store, inside this whole complex, which now consists of 16 separate parcels. But inside this complex, if you go up on the roof, and look at the northwest back corner, you'll notice a rooftop of a little house that is encased in this complex. It's really pretty fun.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Did you
So-
run into the Kircher grocery store? Or
There were so many grocery stores
Oh,
in
really?
Lansing that we really could not do much with them for this exhibit. Lansing had dozens and
Tons.
dozens because every little neighborhood had
they
its
did.
own.
Yeah, that was the
And it was a
tradition.
grocery store. There was a meat market.
It's a bakery.
You
There
get
was
to
a
know the
bakery.
That's
butcher,
right. There
and
were-
he gave you just the cut you wanted.
That's right. There were 20 food-related businesses on Michigan Avenue between Cedar Larch and the city limits. There were 8 food-related businesses just on the 2000 block where Amos is
Where Amos
now.
is.
Wow.
So it was a much different day.
Is there any possibility that that kind of custom meat butchering would come back along with the
I think
farmer
so.
market
I think so.
fruits
There's
and
a huge.
vegetables?
We had Lonesome Pines in our market, our farmers market last year, and I know that they're vending in other markets, and they have free-range beef,
Uh-huh.
and they're in demand. Free-range chicken is in demand. I think that the interest in
Now, see,
And-
when I first came here, I used to see trucks for Paul Fata, F-A-T-A. I don't know how they
Mhm.
pronounced
I
it.
think that's still in business.
Yeah, are they
That's
still in
too.
business?
That's
They were the
too.
ones that supplied a lot of restaurants, weren't they?
Right.
I mean,
Mhm.
that's part of the difference as well. I mean, in
Right.
the old days, restaurants they didn't want to offer local. They wanted to offer things
Right.
as exotic as they could.
Right.
Pineapple from Hawaii would be a big
Exactly,
deal.
exactly.
See, and they probably go every morning to the Eastern Market.
Oh, yes.
Try
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah, yeah. To pick it up.
repackage.
Yeah.
That's right.
Do we have any kind of fish market around like that? I don't think not here out in the Midwest, do we?
Haven't in a while. We used to have a fish market. Do you remember that
Yes.
downtown? At lines
Yeah.
forming out the door and
It was
around the corner.
incredibly
It was
popular.
amazing.
It was, wasn't
Friday
it?
night fish fry.
It got burned down.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I would love to see your cookbooks when you're exhibiting because one of the other food initiatives inside the Allen Marketplace is a kitchen, a licensed kitchen.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing lots and lots of workshops on food preparation, food preservation. Like to do a job skill, a culinary job skill training program for people who are unemployed or underemployed perhaps and who want to learn some basic culinary skills, some safe food handling practices, and pick up a certificate, demonstrating mastery of these skills.
Now with the
and
new
lots
cottage,
of other just fun
now with the new
food-related
cottage
activities.
food law, people can create in their own home kitchens up till
Yes.
I think they can generate as much as 35,000 a year before.
Yes, they can.
But now, could they, as they were making that transition from being a home-based business into being more of a commercial business, would they be able to rent your
Very
kitchen?
likely. Oh, very likely. And we will be renting it out
Ah,
evenings and weekends.
okay.
And so this will be a licensed kitchen. And when people do create value-added product in a kitchen for distribution, the kitchen itself has to be licensed, and they're actually licensed for creation of the product in that particular space. And so
Oh, I
we've been
see.
working really pretty closely with the Health Department and with Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development right from the get-go to ensure that this kitchen will pass muster.
There's quite a few creative food products that, I mean, you can do in your home kitchen things like pickles, and you
Mhm.
can do
Mhm.
breads and so forth, but other kinds of products have to be done in a licensed kitchen
Right, that's
regardless,
right.
even if they're small batch type products.
In fact, one of the things that we're thinking of doing is for those young food or old food entrepreneurs who rent the kitchen and create value-added product, is to actually put their product in the exchange, rather than limit the exchange to produce, to fresh
Ah.
produce, to actually include value-added product created on site as well.
I've been told for years, I call it Mother Bucky's mustard. My father worked for a gentleman who was friends, he came from Hollywood, friends with a lot of high-flying people. And he got to know a French chef who had made his own fabulous mustard. And my father ended up with the recipe, told me if I ever shared it with anybody, he would kill me. Of course, he often wanted to kill me for other reasons. But the mustard was a definite plus I had to be careful about. But I still have that recipe. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's made out of stale beer. And I've often thought, I've missed my calling in life. I should have just made large vats of mustard. I could have probably cornered the mustard.
Made a
market.
Mustard
fortune
is
with
one of the hot
fortune.
food
Yes,
items.
yes,
Is it really?
There's hundreds
It
of
is.
mustards.
Well, I'm going to be talking
Yeah.
to you, Joan. I'll be down there on
All
Saturday
right.
mornings in that kitchen with
We'll
all
give you
my
a
stale
special
beer.
deal, special
Yes.
rental rate.
Did you find little unique products that have been created here in Michigan, in Lansing?
It is amazing how many food products have sold in Lansing over time. Just the variety of things that we came across was immense. But, a lot of them were little tiny
Yeah,
things.
right. Boutique items.
But when you think about it, I mean, they were huge employers too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something, talking about giving people these food skills and so on.
Right.
Unfortunately, so many people have grown up eating food out of a bag and food out of a
Yeah.
box that there are so many people who even to pick up a modern cookbook and read it, it's like a foreign language to them.
Mm-hmm.
It really amazes me how many people you meet who are younger. Their parents grew up in the era of TV dinners,
Yep.
and that's what they raise their kids on. And the whole idea of producing food and even knowing, being able, if you find a bakery, to be able to go get a job at that bakery, no idea.
Yeah. I look at the Ferguson Academy in Detroit, which teaches young women how to grow food, but I think
Right.
there's that whole other step too,
About learning
building
how to
up how
prepare.
you're handling, preparing.
One of the things that we're intending to do once we bring the market indoors is to hold educational sessions on Wednesdays during the market.
Oh.
So people can kind of float back and forth between the large bay area where the market will be taking place into the kitchen and watch the preparation of food from products that are available that day in the market, in the farmer's market. Because people are rediscovering cooking, and I think there's huge interest in figuring out what to do with kale and many other
Are you going to have an open house? I mean, a big opening?
We are going to have a huge opening, and we may not have it until early next year.
Okay.
Because we're rolling out each of these programs. The exchange we're rolling out in the next few weeks. The kitchen will probably open officially by the time we complete all of the approvals processes. The kitchen will probably open in August for rental. In September, we'll launch a whole series of educational programming. We'll bring the market indoors early November, probably the first Wednesday in November, and then we're fully functional, actually fully operational by the end of the year. In fact, the one other food program in the Allen Marketplace is another kind of back to the future, function, in that we're going to be providing storage. It used to be that people had root cellars and
And a cold locker.
Yeah,
You'd have a cold locker down at the grocery
exactly.
store. Yeah.
And what we're wanting to provide to farmers, obviously, who'll be coming back and forth every Wednesday and may not want to carry as much food with them each time, is providing storage to neighbors. A place to store their backyard harvest, their bulk purchases, at the end of the season, so that they can be coming to the farmers market, the indoor farmers market in February, and trot on over to their locker, to access some of the food that they harvested in September or October.
My biggest loss was my second refrigerator, which I kept in the basement. My parents gave me their old refrigerator. That little guy lasted for 40 years. I'm sure he sucked up more power. He was not an Energy Star by a long shot. But when you have a home garden, that's a critical issue.
And when you mentioned that you thought that probably we couldn't match the 40% of produce raised in Victory Gardens in the 40s. But actually, there are some interesting studies that are emerging that suggest that we can raise much more produce for an urban population in the available parks and empty lots and rooftops. I mean, in Havana, of course, it's year-round gardening, but in Havana, 75% of the food consumed in Havana is grown in the neighborhoods.
When the Russians cut off the oil, they had to figure out how to feed themselves.
That's right, and they are, of course, they're the organic food capital of the world, and amazing things happening there.
And that's why they don't need as much health care.
Much to be learned. But
I have to say first, though, this is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Joan Nelson, and she's tell us more.
Well, I wanted to say that I think that real food security, I think will require that we grow a fair proportion of our food in our neighborhoods, and I think we can. We just 2 Saturdays ago celebrated the 5th birthday of the Hunter Park Garden House, and that has grown so phenomenally. And we've been amazed at the interest that people have in gardening, and it's not just on the east side. As you know, the South Lansing Community Development Association has lots of gardens on the south side. The Garden Project, a project of the Greater Lansing Food Bank, has over 100 community gardens that they've installed over the last several years. We had 250 East Side kids involved in our youth gardening programs last year doing fascinating projects. And kids love food. They love digging in the dirt, or at least those that are coming to the greenhouse. They're distributing these little garden in a box kits throughout
Yeah.
the neighborhood, about 80 of them out now.
Yeah.
Little 2x2 cedar boxes that are a scale appropriate introduction to yard gardening for people who've not done it before or who have mobility challenges. You know, the edible Hunter Park
if we
lots
do
going
want to
on.
cut down on our healthcare costs, getting fresh fruits and
Yes,
vegetables into
yes.
urban neighborhoods is essential. My only concern really nowadays, and we saw an event down at the Capitol a few weeks ago, is that the United States has been remarkably remiss in being able to get good labeling on GMO foods.
Yes.
And one of the things I think that helps people when they go to farmers markets is you can kind of grill your local farmer and find out what they're growing. The problem nowadays, though, is that with the problems of drift and the fact that other kinds of seeds are becoming increasingly hard to come by, we're seeing that sometimes GMOs are just simply a sort of inevitable takeover. I'm wondering whether that sort of threatens the purity and the spirit of the movement that we're talking about.
I think there's probably a lot of concern about GMOs. I know we encourage people at markets to ask the farmer,
Yeah.
about their growing practices. We encourage labeling. In fact, lots of markets are increasingly requiring labeling. I think it's really very
Are they
important.
requiring
Yeah.
GMO labeling?
Well, labeling of some sort, some kind of explanation of people's growing practices. Ours is a big tent market, and I think probably most of the 20 or so in the region are as well. And what that means is that we have organic farmers, we have more conventional farmers,
Right.
we have urban, we have rural. Um,
Meridian has that sort of
That
three-tiered
sort of-
labeling system.
yes, yes.
But it doesn't have anything that tells you whether the
About
crops are GMOs.
Yeah, and I think that is the next big issue.
I do
mean,
too.
there was that, Japan just canceled all its wheat orders
Right.
from the United States.
Because of
and-
contamination.
Exactly, and so it's a serious concern. It's now going to become even more of a concern.
There's
given
increasing research
trade
that
issues.
shows that it does have an effect on people's guts, and it does because of the use of reverse viruses and reverse bacteria that they use as markers. They thought they'd be fairly inert, but they may be having an impact on people's bodies. We're seeing a dramatic increase in the number of people who are identified as being celiac, for example, and there's some question about whether that may be tied to the emergence of GMO products that are causing our intestines to become more sensitive to different allergens and different problems. So I think it's a real worry that we're going to have to face. Bill, you had a question.
Well, I was going to ask Val, because this weekend's an opportunity for people to discover some lost things in downtown Lansing, in addition to grocery stores, butchers, and bakeries. Val, you're doing a walking tour of downtown Lansing. It's called Lost Lansing. What are some of the things that aren't there anymore you're going to point out?
Well, like the grocery stores, there are a lot of things that have existed downtown over the years that people have no idea were once there. For example, Lansing downtown used to be home to a lot of private residences, including the Olds home, the Barnes Castle, which is something that a lot of us have heard referenced, but not too many people really know what it is. And those are
I don't know what it is. What's the Barnes Castle?
Orlando Mac Barnes was a huge local businessman. He was mayor at one point.
300 pounds or?
Not quite.
Not that
no.
huge, okay.
He was very involved with railroads, actually, and made a fortune, built a beautiful home that was in downtown at the corner of what was then Main and Washington, so today Malcolm X and Washington. It was, I think it was 26 rooms. It was just giant.
A 1%er.
Yeah, exactly.
He was.
But we're going to be looking at some of these things that used to be downtown, because I think most of us go downtown today and we look around and think, oh, that's just always been there. And then you come across this picture and you're like, huh, what was this? And so we're going to try to fill in some of those puzzle pieces. What was there before the parking structures and the parking lots and all of that. And it's interesting because, talking about, food and using your land and so on, one of the governors actually even got in a dispute at one point in time about Capitol Square, where it used to be, not where the current Capitol is, but where the second Capitol was, which was a couple blocks down, where Cooley Law School has buildings today.
Really?
And as I was reading through some of the old Auditor General reports from the 1850s, apparently one year they decided to actually plant wheat around the Capitol on
Really?
the lawn, so it would be considered a better use of space.
Hey, well, that's a tradition we might want to revive.
And then the idea was to sell the grain, and that money would go to the state budget. Now, he recouped all of like $3, I think, from the harvest.
Forward thinking.
No, I like
That was
that.
pretty interesting.
We're
I
going
think
to
that would be a nice thing. Why don't we have a nice fruit and veggie garden on
We're going to meet in front of City Hall at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. The tour's open
This
to
Saturday?
the public. It's free. Yep. And we're going to spend about an hour and a half wandering around downtown, cover about 8 blocks or so. And we're going to look at 11 lost structures. And you'll get to see pictures of them. You'll get to hear the stories behind them. We'll visit the sites where they once stood. And some of them, are no-brainers, like Old City Hall, where the current City Hall is. There was a building there that lasted until 1959 that a lot of people remember from their childhood. Other buildings like the Second Capitol burned down in the 1880s. And so it's something that, most of us have no frame of reference at all. Some of them were homes. One of my favorites was the Octagon House that was downtown. You want to talk about a guy who was interested in food. Orson Fowler was a phrenologist out of New York.
A phrenologist?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, so he would feel the bumps on your
Yeah.
head. And he advocated octagon houses because you had extra sources of light, extra sources of fresh air coming in. And he promoted this whole healthy living. He would tour across the country. He came to Marshall, Michigan, actually, in the 1850s and spoke. And so, sort of the foodies of the day, the local health nuts built these houses. And we had one downtown where our boss is today. And he was quite the rabble-rouser. I mean, he was a vegetarian in the 1850s when most Americans had, 3 kinds of meat in their dinner if they could afford it. He advocated for outrageous things like daily exercise, suggested that perhaps women should not be binding themselves in corsets all the time.
Wow, a commie.
An end to child labor.
He's
He
on the
was.
list. He's on the
He
list.
was.
He's on the list.
And we had one of these homes in downtown Lansing.
Wow. Oh, that's fascinating. We need a movie about him, or we need something about him. I mean, he sounds like one of those characters like the Kellogg's, with the graham crackers.
He had odd food eating and habits.
Yeah. Oh God, when we think about all the sort of food cults that there were, and this state was big on them, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, Kellogg's.
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole
huge.
tradition of people with, we are what I think Joan will attest to this, the second most diverse food state in the nation. I mean,
Yeah.
we have more.
Second only to California.
Yeah, it's astounding. We grow everything here. We've got everything here. Even in considering the fact that we only have that summer growing season, although we extend it with hoop houses now.
Right.
When you say we're the most diverse food economy, what have you seen in the 10 years that's new, or I guess a throwback? What's popped out that we never saw before around here? What kind of fruit, vegetable?
Well,
I mean-
kale.
I was gonna say
mentioned
kale.
Kale, yeah.
We grow half a dozen different kinds of kale in the greenhouse, and who knew? And
Lacinato is my favorite.
Yeah.
How about tomatoes? Are people starting to grow?
Many different kinds of heirloom
Heirlooms,
tomatoes,
yeah.
that come to the market. There's still
Yeah.
lots of starts, and there are a couple of growers who specialize in these just extraordinary tomatoes.
The black
Varieties,
tomato, I'm not sure what
yes.
they're called, but they're
Black
delicious.
Prim.
Well, those
Yeah.
are good.
It's a food education, and what's fascinating is how much the farmers can tell you about what it is that they're growing.
Yeah.
They beg to be asked. They love being asked.
I interviewed a woman by telephone, and I never did get to see this, but her grandmother handed her down seeds that had been handed down. They could trace it all the way back 100 years in the family,
Right.
that particular variety had been grown, and then when the granddaughter reached a certain age, the grandmother would pass it. I mean, that's really one of those amazing family traditions. Food matters. It is a big deal in people's lives.
It is so remarkably easy to bring people together around food, whether gardening or markets or cooking classes
Or history.
tours,
Yeah.
tours,
History.
history. It's fascinating. Everybody eats, and everybody's interested in this topic.
Food preservation as well. I mean, I still know how to can from the old days with my mother, watching her do it, and my grandmother putting up food, drying food. I mean, it's a really fascinating subculture, and we have everything from the sort of Zingerman's $150 an ounce olive oil at one end of the spectrum to the utility grade vegetables that I always liked because they probably had fewer chemicals on them.
But I think something that's also significant is that food-related initiatives build community.
Yeah, they do.
To the extent that you, rather than can at home, bring a whole slew of people into a kitchen, a community
Which
kitchen.
is much more efficient.
Right, much
And
more
less
efficient.
hot
And more
in your
fun.
home.
Much more fun,
Yeah.
right? And you can learn even as you're, working with others. I mean, so it's markets are. I mean, it's fun to shop at a farmer's market and to reconnect with neighbors and catch the latest news. And so these are all very social activities, and they build community. They knit people together.
when Drew and I got married, and this is now some 25 or more years ago, I had a group of women come over 2 days before, and we did all of the cooking and baking for the upcoming wedding. And that was more fun than anything.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it was a nice, and it was really a nice tradition than to have all the food be homemade at the event itself. So,
Right,
yeah, those are the
right.
kinds of things that matter in families.
Right.
Yeah, handing down that family recipe. Wow, this has been a really wonderful show. We're going to have to repeat this, and I'm looking forward to the event on the walk.
The walk on Saturday, 10 o'clock in front of City Hall, Lost Lansing Tour. You can go to lansinghistory.org to learn more about it.
And July 7th, they can find the exhibit on Lansing Eats.
Lansing Eats at the Kreitz Building on the corner of Washington and Oakland.
Bill will, I'm sure, post all of that on the Lansing Online News website, and you can also check out our webcast on the LansingOnlineNews.com website. And I look forward to seeing everybody again on Monday night, and thank you very much to Valerie Marvin and to Joan Nelson, and we'll be back next week with Lansing Online News Radio here on WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.